So what I want to do here now is going a little bit beyond the rational faculty in an experimental way, and I want to explore, maybe I can say, or we could say, the normativity of love, which we know, although we might not really fully understand it, or even in a scientific culture very difficultly understand it. But I want to work with it, and let's see what comes from it. And so I will work with, because it needs some.
Will it work?
Yeah, it's yeah. No, I mean it's kind of like it will work. It will work. So there's this mobilization of the lived experience, which I will work with, which I will invite you into, and I'll also apply the phenomenological perspective. And I will bring this together with a little bit of Buddhist contemplative science. So there we have sort of explicit mysticism. And I do this being indebted to my teacher, Francisco Varela, who was an active mystical Buddhist. He was following a Dzogchen teaching line, and there's a side of Buddhist practice and how could we call it, understanding, which is yet to be uncovered, or discovered, which goes farther than the openly used and admitted Buddhist methodology he's using in his works. Had been using increasingly in his works, but there's more. So these three things I want to bring together in this little talk. And so let's start with the experience. And this is the reason I wanted my computer, because this is a little movie which I will run, and just take some instructions for this little movie. Just go to a fresh memory of a butterfly summer experience you already had. So this video has been taken in the Krkonoše mountains in northern Czech Republic about a year ago. And while I run it, just try to find the place in your heart where you were when you met this summer experience, or do it with this butterfly. But try to go into your inner lived experience. Maybe you want to do it again, and you'll get it again a little bit later. So you see, I want to use this faculty of ours, which is the direct experience of life, by being alive and by being in touch with life. And I want to argue that our way of being life and being in touch with life and being touched by life is a direct pointing out of the nature of this life, of the nature of living reality. direct pointing out that's my using of the Buddhist terms, actually. And I don't say it is a discursive, rational explanation. I don't say this, but I say this is something is understood. And it is understood in a place which is normally not sought after in science, which is our heart, which, according to the mystical tradition of Sufism, is a perceptive organ. It is the perceptive organ of love, actually, in Sufism. Or we could say it is a perceptive organ of how life needs to unfold. So we have some normativity here already. Only that we don't get there by thinking, but we get there by experiencing being connected on the level of this perceptive organ that we can call the heart. And I showed you a butterfly because a butterfly is also a totem being to cross-connect these spheres and these domains. And it's laid down in the amazing knowledge of ancient Greek, in which butterfly, psyche, also means soul, and it also means breath. Isn't that beautiful? If you only go far enough back, we see that we are not the only ones obsessed by this, by the yearning to realize what it means to live in togetherness. And so we could say, as butterfly is psyche, we could also say that what I try to do for you here is a little bit allowing you to have a psychedelic experience. And before I talked about a guy, somebody who invented holotropic breathing in Czechia again, and as a way to have the experience of LSD without LSD. So what I want to do actually is to bring you a butterfly to show you that you can have a psychedelic experience just by sitting with a butterfly. And I'm saying this somehow tongue in cheek, but I'm also very serious. And as you see, this word, when it was just baptized, and it didn't necessarily mean lots of drugs, it just meant clear perception of the soul-like nature of what there is. And my idea is that we do have this clear perception all the time, because it is part of what we are as being this living reality. And we don't use it. We don't use this perceptual organ. We don't use the heart normally in coming to terms with what this reality is. And we should do it. We should use it, because we will miss an essential part if we don't. That's the idea. And the good thing is that the ancient traditions did do it, and they have very, very refined practices and very refined terminologies to talk about it, and that's what I will try to show you in the later part. But let me now explain a little bit more in depth about the psychedelic nature of reality within our reach, in our hand, or in a summer meadow. Again, something which now they most have been mown, if they have been there at all, if they have been allowed to grow beyond a little green. And so what are we seeing here? What are we seeing in this cut from the living reality we are part of? What we are seeing here, and again, please enjoy your heart reacting to this. So please do allow the emotional connotation of watching this, or do allow yourself to go into remembrance of moments or hours or days or nights you spend in a flowering meadow. And because this is part of knowing what it is about, this inner way of being, of experiencing a state. And what I experience when I'm in the vicinity of this, and even when I look at photos of this, is love. And people who go into nature, and many people love to go into nature, do this because they have a potent feeling of connection. And I would say this is a feeling of love. So we have to somehow, we have the task of understanding what I'm talking about when I say love, and bringing this together with what organisms do when they realize this flowering togetherness, this flowering reciprocity. And I only recently, only in the, let's say, in the last days, I've thought about the relationship between the experience / term / idea / definition of love and normativity, which is very interesting. Because love is actually something very normative. Only that we can't say that actually what it really is. It is a state, and it is an experience, and it is a force, and it is a truth, maybe, a desire. But love knows that it is good for life to be. Love knows that it is good for life to be. And what we understand when we're in the presence of this meadow is at least that it is good for life to be. So that's part of our experience. We stand there, we sit there, we smell the smell, we see the colors, we see the all plants, by the way, right? And we also see the little animals, the insects. We hear them. They tickle us. They might even bite us. And we understand that reality, living reality, is a continuum, one single whole, individualizing into smaller wholes, given forth by the desire that there be life. So that it is very important that we do not get rid of our profound experience as a living being when we encounter life. That's the grand old scientific tradition, is to unlearn this. And I remember in my upbringing as a biologist, that was the sort of like the unmentioned ongoing lesson. Get rid of your subjective experience if you are dealing with life. Forget it. Throw it out of the window. Don't use it. This is wrong. This is sentimental. This is cliché. This is cheesy. This makes you soft. And I'm saying here that this is actually the source of our true understanding, because only then can we keep in mind two things. And one thing is the physical, the sensual understanding that we exist in a continuum of something all-encompassing. And the second is the understanding, or the experience, the existential experience, that this continuum is not a thing, but it is an immensely personal affair. And these things belong together, and these things are necessary in order to understand anything about them. If we shed them, then we will lose that which we are looking for from the beginning. And what we see there in this meadow is something which I understand as shared breath. You could say what we see there is shared breath. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how this continuum is actually establishing itself on a physical plane, on a physical level, or on a structural level. And this is by sharing breath or sharing flesh. And don't forget, again, that when you are lying or sitting with these plants, you are breathing. And the plants are breathing too. And the miracle is that you breathe out and you feed the plants with your body. And they will build their body with your body, with the CO2, with the C, with the carbon from your body. And you will be fed by them. You know, that's something everybody of you knows, of course, because this is just something you know. And it sounds so trivial, you know, we all learned it in school and we just know this little trivial thing. But this is a profound realization, actually, that I do exist because there's another who feeds me with their own body, and I do the same. And I cannot run away from it. It's not a decision. It's not something I say, okay, I have to do it, otherwise I will be punished. I just do it. And what comes out of this is the meadow, the flowering meadow. I find this pretty amazing, actually. So again, in my rather clumsy way of being enraptured by Apennine sage and huge hymenopterans. And I just show you again this circular mode that we all exist. All beings exist in processes in circles of mutual feeding, and they actually feed on one another. I mean, that adds another layer of mystery to it. And we talked already about the relation between autopoiesis and symbiosis, and this is, of course, a little allusion to this, that you cannot have autopoiesis without allopoiesis. So this is included in it. This is the same happening seen from a different perspective. And the interesting thing is that by feeding on one another through feeding and through breathing, that we have a total continuum of matter through the living reality. There is no privileged matter contained in little agents which sit on this matter. Matter is something which we all share. We could even say we are one huge physiology. And this is also amazing, that my body is going away while I'm talking here, while I'm breathing here, while you breathe my body in while you are breathing. So these are very basic but very mysterious things which I think need to be taken into account, need to be thought of. And again, this is not only an external process, not only an external happening, but this is also an experienced happening. So, I mean, there's a reason why in ancient Greek, psyche is also breath, because breath is also soul. Breath is also the experience to be fed without asking. Breath is also the experience to distribute myself without being asked. So it has immediately an experiential dimension, an emotional dimension, a profound dimension of the heart. And just as a little esoteric aside, the heart chakra is, of course, the same area where you also breathe. So the heart, with its beat, with its swelling and then releasing, is the same movement as the breath. So we have this taking and giving and taking. And to counterbalance a little bit this little esoteric idea, I show you the Krebs cycle, where you see where breath happens. And I show you this just in order to demonstrate that it is the old metaphor we also all learn in school, and then even when we start to be trained as biologists and we know better, we still carry around, is that we are eating, which is, of course, somehow some carbon source, energized carbon source, and then we are burning it, and using the energy, and then there's some exhaust. And with this picture, I wanted to show you that this is not how it happens. What we eat becomes part of our body physiology. What we eat becomes part of our flesh. And what we breathe out in pink, the CO2, just comes from our body. So we're not a motor, we're not a machine. And every kid learns in school that we are somehow, we can be compared to motors. We're like combustion engines, you know. I'll show you a little bit more on this, what kids have to learn, what we all had to learn, actually. We were all kids in school. No, instead we are transformed sage. And I think that sounds very, very different. Okay. Some more imaginative pictures. So I hope you find this, let's say, passably beautiful, because I just wanted to give one thought about beauty and the experience of beauty and the whole domain of aesthetics, which is somehow coupled to it in various and complicated ways. And I wanted to just bring up the thought that eventually there is a side to this, to the experience of beauty, which is very much about the experience of receiving life. So then beauty would actually not be some perception or representation of a coded surface, but it would be an exchange of life. Or you could also say as giving life to someone is an act of love. Caring for someone, being interested in the life of someone is an act of love. Beauty is the experience of love. I already said this in a slightly different way, but I want to say it now a little bit more reinforced. If breath, and of course I was breathing with this beech tree when I took the photo. If breath is my involuntary way of feeding other organisms, it is always an act of love. Without me being able even to decide against it. And it's very reciprocal with trees. So I'm standing there, and on many levels, I'm experiencing my being fed by a continuum of aliveness, which I am part of in an irrevocable way. And to me, this dimensions at least, needs to be part of our deliberations, of our constructs. What life is about, what life needs, what are the needs of life, what is necessary in order for life to be able to give life. All these things we cannot do, I think, without the depth dimension of our experience of being alive. I mean, this is such an incredible privilege. This is such a great residency, research residency. I mean, I want to think about life, talk about life, and I'm life. I want to understand the world, and I'm this world. Isn't this wonderful? I mean, sometimes I can really get ecstatic. So I'm already a biologist, even without doing. I could have just saved all these painful years because I'm already live. And you see, that's of course a thought which is very much inspired by Hans Jonas, for whom I said it already before in this question, for whom the evidence of our own living existence is a main philosophical tool. Of course, let's say coming from the same vein, or following him there. Yeah, so the blue sky, the commons of breath. You see, we can also talk about the atmosphere and the climate as a deranged commons of breath, or as breath which isn't the commons anymore, but land grabbing, breath grabbing, or something like this. And again, as breath is an involuntary act of love, when we look up to the blue sky and we have this beautiful feeling. We look up to the blue sky. I mean, somehow we take it for granted in a way. Sometimes it's very blue and very hot and the sun is blazing, so it becomes a bit different, and you see the chemtrails there, so it's all relative. But we know that the blue sky, the sky, is again a profound cultural obsession, cultural symbol. And in Buddhist meditation, the sky is used as a pointing out to realization. There's a practice in which the disciple is offered to understand that he is the blue sky. And it's done with the blue sky. And then when we understand that actually the blue sky is actually me because I breathe myself out in the blue sky, then we are actually, it's very realistic. And that's where I want to take you now in this second part after these preliminary ideas about the biology of reciprocity, aka the biology of love. And I want to use for this the fundamental understanding of what the Nyingma Buddhists call the nature of the mind. And I use this because because it appeals to me, and because it was the school my teacher was trained in. So that was what he was doing. He was a Nyingma follower and doing Dzogchen practice. And we see another mandala. That's not the sky, but it's another important mandala on this picture. And let me just very shortly, I will go into more detail, just show you these three aspects. So they talk about the nature of the mind, or the ground, rigpa in Sanskrit. And the nature of the mind, of course, it's not the mind in Western understanding. It's not the nature of your thoughts. But mind is everything. So as Dogen, another Buddhist sage, said, mind is also fence posts and tiles. Everything is mind. But this everything is also primordial cognition. So primordial self-arising awareness. And this mind, this everything, this living everything comes under three aspects which are very interesting. And the first one, which we all know because it's somehow a Buddhist stereotype, is shunyata, which is emptiness of ego. Normally people just think it's emptiness, and then it's like nothingness from a Western position, like there's nothing, bleak, blank, but it's not true. It is everything but without yourself and still experienced. That's the idea. Everything without yourself but still experienced. So you know the summer meadow already comes sort of close, and you're able to somehow eclipse your thinking. There's the second one, is what they call lalita. These are the Sanskrit words. They're also the Tibetan words which are omitted. And it could be, I think, best translated as luminous aboutness. I will talk about it more. And the third one is what normally is called compassion, but I think it is more accurate to call it lovingness. So there's some back luminosity in everything, which is infinitely tender and infinitely about bringing forth life. And I already told you I'm somehow trying to place my baby steps in the huge tracks my teacher left, Francisco Varela left, and it's very interesting that that I'm now 22 years after his death. I'm now somehow understanding what he was doing while I was in Paris and working with him and publishing with him. Actually, I didn't get it, and I didn't want to get it because I found it like slightly esoteric, like some of you might right now. Like I found it like that's not something for me. I want to do philosophy and science, but still, it somehow was happening around me. So I'm somehow elaborating on his profound interest to understand life. That's what he always said, what he said already when he was very young. I want to now I want to know the nature of this universe. I mean, that's a big thing, actually. And this universe is full of life, so we want to know the nature of life. We want to understand with every fiber we have what life is. And yeah, so just some anecdotal pictures. I was there when the internet looked like this, not very stylish. Everybody could code it. It was super easy. And he once gave me a very bad computer virus, actually, thinking about this. Like, my computer totally wrecked. And when we wrote this paper, and he very sort of like slightly timid way of saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I gave you this really brutal, nasty virus. It was terrible." And yeah, and we did brain research, first-person brain research with this bonnet for the electrodes, and I also had the bonnet. I don't know if you recognize me. Yeah, that's Antoine. Yeah, he was already also quoted. Yeah, we did some serious science there, as you can see. So no wonder I'm talking about mysticism here. And yeah, so I'm very much indebted to all this, and I'm more and more realize how much indebted I'm to the untold pointing out, actually, which somehow was there. So I'm going ahead on this. So what I'm showing you here is, many of you know it, it's from the 1997 paper, is the sort of structural scheme of autopoiesis, the circular scheme that the cell doesn't do anything else than building itself. This is, again, by the way, it's also not about survival, it's about creating. That's also very important. It's not at all about survival. It's not interesting. It's about creating. And what is not so solved so brilliantly in this picture, but what of course is very important, is on the left side, is the understanding that that this continuous bringing forth of itself, the organism it does with the matter of the universe, which doesn't belong to itself. So it takes in matter, and this circular process of creating itself happens on matter, which is actually body of others. So this process is self-maintaining, or even self-enlarging, but the process is not identical with the matter, not at all. So the matter it's completely indifferent. It's actually happening on what it is not. So we have a profound paradox there. So what is actually creating me as an organism is not me. Very interesting. And it's also an experience. It's also important. It's also what you see there is an experience, and you all have the experience. The experience is that you desire to continue to exist. We all know this. It's very easy. It's very much in the center. Like you will. That's the one of the nucleus maybe of experience. That's the experience. So this doesn't go without experience. And you could also say it's again just the cycle of breath. So we have ever-growing cycles of this circularity, which creates self, which is an experience through rearranging world, which is everything. And of course then self is empty. And this is the starting page of this famous and somehow enigmatic essay, Organism, a Meshwork of Selfless Self. So self, of course, is empty. So you will never find the self, because it's not there, because it is in the desire, which is our experience to give life to oneself. Let me put it like this. So self is empty. That's very interesting. I mean, it can be very frightening when you look into yourself and actually I'm empty. But then on the other hand, it is also ongoing all the time. And this emptiness connects you with everything, which then again is pretty beautiful. And just let me show you some classical metaphorical material where the waves build and then crash. And the waves, of course, are not the ocean, but the waves are also the ocean. And the Sufis say, you are the drop that contains the ocean. You know, that's something you start to understand when you accept that the self is totally empty, but it is built from the matter of everything. And then suddenly the sentence like you're the drop that contains the ocean makes totally sense. And I find this absolutely amazing. Yeah. Again, a little recap before we go into a little critique and then into the three aspects of the ground. A little recap. So again, pointing out. So I really daily sit with this experience that these beings, like myself, but I'm much more opaque to myself than others are. These beings, these waves of the ocean, these selfless selves, these desires which have no bottom and nothing which is their own. They point out to me that everything is reciprocity, that everything is interest in the aliveness of the other, and the interest in the aliveness of the other goes through giving myself away to the other fully. So in my breath already I enact the gesture of becoming world again, of emptying myself actually, emptying myself. And I mean, for me it is actually understanding that we see there the embodied interest in the aliveness of the other, that we just melt when we see flowers because we understand this. So that's very much something which our heart can read and which our heart can understand. And as soon as we detract this aspect of our heart's understanding, we have a problem which is not solvable. You all know this. The heart problem, which is actually a soft problem, which is the butterfly problem. The heart problem is the butterfly problem. The heart problem is to not include from the beginning that butterfly means soul. Then you create a heart problem, and then you have a heart problem, as we all know. I mean, we are here because of the heart problem in some ways, some indirect, maybe slightly indirectly related ways. But the heart problem is, I am distanced from the inner experience of life, or the inner experience of life is an enigma for me instead of being the source, the center, the base, the ground. And then we teach our children that we are motors, or that cells are factories. I have to show you this because it is so beautiful. I drew it from something I found on the internet. That's a cell, and the organelles in the cell, they are represented by different stations in the production process. And as you can see, the energy, the mitochondria in the cell is represented by what? By a coal-burning power plant, like by a steam machine. Isn't that fantastic? And I mean, this is truly something kids learn in school. And my son came home. I had this when I was in the 70s. My son came home in the 2000s, and he had this. And as he is somehow a geek, he was sort of like happy about it. He said, "Look, this is so interesting." He said, "This is totally wrong. I will call your teacher." He goes, "No, don't do it." I tried like 50 times, and they never allowed me to call their teacher. So it's modern because you see there's a lady sitting in the nucleus and directing everything, choreographing everything. But you know this you can do this when you tell your pupils that there is no experience in life. Then you can do this, and then this is the moment when you lose them. You know, they say, okay, I'm going to become a musician or a movie director or whatever, but biology is not for me because it is so terribly boring. And it also has some practical consequences. Everybody, Germans enjoy this here. That's the giant leaf sucker in Berlin, and it's nicer without leaves, you know. Ohne Blätter ist es netter. Of course, because this is just all dead stuff. And it's much netter without them. And but this is because you have already omitted that. That butterfly means soul, and this is an experience. So you also omit the experience, and without the experience, we become incredibly sad. So now, for those who want to be both happy and sad, again, a little bit experience. You see, can you see these are the last days of this butterfly. The wings are already very much ragged. Okay, so now what I'm going to do now is to map the qualities of the organism I have tried to talk about before onto these three levels. It's not levels, onto these three flavors of the nature of reality, you could say. That's what I'm going to do. And I show you another video, another little pointing out video. Now you had the butterfly and these umbels of this wonderful flower, of course, but now we go full flower, full botany. And I show you this, maybe twice, because I will also read you the enlarged translations of these three terms. So please, again, enjoy this. That was an early spring day from my room. Don't look at the paint which is missing on the window, and just look at this Japanese cherry tree. And can you see how this tree is a self-moving mover? So you see, the tree and I agreed that the car was somehow a disturbance, and the movement ceased. Sometimes you're just lucky to get your pointing out instruction. Okay, so why emptiness of ego? I mean, this is actually something I can really, really recommend. You can sit with this blossoming tree, and it will teach you. He, she, they will teach you emptiness of ego. You just need to sit long enough and diligent enough. So an organism is empty. So that's basically the selfless selves. It has no fixed material substance. It has no kernel. In metabolism, the world is passing through it, only temporarily unfolded in an individual form. What yesterday was corn on the field is now literally me, my flesh. What today is my flesh will breathed out by me and breathed in by a tree be an acorn at the end of next summer. An organism realizes the world in mutual transformation with others. So an organism is realizing the world. It is a realization of the world. It is a way of the world to manifest. And we with it, and we inside. It's actually, for me, it's also a personal path of somehow familiarizing with me, but the experience of being able to experience not from the perspective of my ego is pretty. It's interesting, very profound. I have only three slides missing. 3 slides left, so no worries. So luminous aboutness, Lalita. That's the Rolpa is. I have also the Tibetan words here. So an organism is luminous. Of course, it is luminous. Like look at the meadow. It is ever manifesting in new forms. Being an organism means to experience how it is to be an organism through the depth of subjective experience. It is meaningful. It means to be immersed in qualia, in aboutness, To live means to feel, to be in a center of existential concern, to be utterly, intensely, existentially involved. It's luminous aboutness. It's always there. And then we have lovingness. And now I use also the word compassion. And compassion, or lovingness, is an incessant bringing forth, a generosity in absoluteness as it appears. It is the continuous desire that there be life. A desire that does not manifest in individualized form, but as an action, as the appearance of itself in its self-realization, both in the sense of creation and apprehension. And final, this is that. So this, what we see is that, what there is. The selfless self in the center of an organism is the activity of giving life. In it, matter and inwardness, the subjective perspective and the perspective of being everything are not separate. An organism is the gift of life coming from this center. So you are the gift of life coming from this desire to give life from your center, which is totally without any space, without any dimension. And this is pure original consciousness, if you would talk to Buddhists, the nature of the mind. No separation at all. And it is accessible because it is in our center. And it is all around us, at least as long as they haven't all died out. Thanks.
So 15 minutes, I think. So we start with Primož. Anybody else who has just slowly, okay, Ella? Yeah? Okay,
First, I would like to say I really appreciate the approach you're taking to this lecture, because I think it's very, very useful and productive for these scientific environments to sometimes enter them with a more poetic sense of mind, because it opens up to new avenues of thinking again. As a second point, I would maybe like to slightly challenge this emphasis on love. Why should it be just love? In a certain sense, if you said that love is giving oneself away, isn't it kind of contrary to normativity? Because if you're giving yourself away, you're in a certain sense dissolving yourself. And this is, in a sense, also something Buddhists are very close to an idea. So maybe kind of like emphatically said, yes, love is what brings things in a certain sense together, but there is also strife, which brings them apart. So why this emphasis just on the love part? It's just an extra point. Maybe someone of a different character than you are, maybe like Schopenhauer, very pessimistic and very negative looking, would emphasize the other side, like for example Heraclitus as well, just pointing out the strife in nature. Look, all these creatures are battling each other and killing each other. So maybe why love?
Yeah, thank you. Very good. Yeah, well, first, you need to keep in mind these the threefold approach. So first, because during my own life, the primal mover of my thinking was actually this experience, which I always knew, which was the beautiful, blissful enigma of my early childhood. You know, just being in this world and being in this experience, and it comes again in the end. I mean, every day is full of this. I just need to encounter beings, and it has changed. It is becoming much more inward experience as well, and that leads me to. So I won't go there. I will go there last. So the very important question, of course, you're pointing to death and say, why love? There's so much death. And I go there last. But before I want to recap this idea that the self-realization of life is always a giving process. And I find this very interesting. And I mean, I just draw it together and say, actually, if I give life to someone, that's a practice of love. I mean, I do this because I find it convincing. And I'm somehow pulling together various traditions. I mean, it's quoting actually humanist psychologist Erich Fromm, who defines love. He says love is the interest, the active interest in the likeness of another. And when I understand that what organisms do is they provide one another with what the others need to live, I found this totally spectacular. I said, hey, wow, this is just a Trump's definition of the active interest of the aliveness of another. It's not active interest in terms of there's the great blue is thinking about being actively interested in the flower. It's probably not what is happening, but it's just happening. Like the butterfly is a way of soul to act, and I think it actually works. And then of course, I'm just meeting the great mystical traditions, which all find love at the base. You know, when you go to continuum, they find it, and love is always somehow bigger than the others, or the Sufis. Actually, everything is love. And the interesting thing is, love is giving, and life is also given. So I find a lot of interesting convergencies. And that makes sense for me in terms of my own experience or my own practice. And then remains, of course, the question, but what about, you say strive, struggle, you know, nature ready tooth and claw, of course. What about, even biographically, what about pain, what about failure, what about all these things? And I think it is important to see that there can be, let's say, it can be layered. And what is death on one layer is an act of giving on a more basic layer. So it's very important not to easily project, let's say, a human idea of safe transactions onto what we see in reality. So, well, actually, the grass needs to be eaten. It's bad, and actually it needs to be eaten because only when it is eaten it remains grass. Otherwise, it will become a forest. So there's a profound, and I really admit I haven't understood it on a rational way fully to the end, of course. But there's a profound, fertile paradox which tells you that sometimes you need to go through something which doesn't seem like fecundity, but it is. So it's very important. It also starts to touch the places where experience is necessary to understand this. Thank you. That's super important question.
Okay, Yogi.
I think Ella should go first.
I think actually my question or my comment was actually very similar to Primož's, because I just kept on thinking about what would be your account of, Bernard Herzog and his. I just have this video of him explaining nature, and I keep him going, oh, I just see asphyxiation and murder and chaos and stuff like that. And I was just wondering, how would you account for a Herzog experience of
Yeah. It's funny. Just some days ago, a friend of mine who was a total fan of his Bavarian German English accent. He sent it to me. He said, "Hey, he's your guy, obviously, right?" Yeah, I would perceive it differently, But in the end, I can only invite you into this perception, and I can't claim to say that's how it is. To me, it is very convincing on the level of the heart. I would perceive it differently, and you could also say this guy is just some urban European, just has been brought into the Amazon, and he has no clue, and he just feels so afraid because he never had the right teachings. If he had been brought up in a local subsistence culture, we would feel completely different. So he's really riffing on this.
But wouldn't that indicate that it's not a direct experience? That his cultural background influences how he experiences, and your cultural background influences how you experience it. Therefore, this goes against this sort of notion of direct experience being a good epistemological entry point into talking about reality as such.
Yeah. But you know, it can be, isn't it also possible to say that there are some cultures who are able not to bury direct experiences, and there are other cultures who notably ours, which is really, really very sophisticated in cutting off certain direct experiences.
I'm a bit Kantian here, I think.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm of course not. Yeah.
This was my question. I mean, I didn't think the car was the most disconcerting thing. The most disconcerting thing is that you showed us movies instead of taking us outside. So we experienced something that was completely disconnected. And I think a lot what you're talking about, I see what you're doing. You're using this language to provide a multimodal perspective on the problems that we're talking about here. And I'll provide a sort of a complementary one tomorrow. So I really like what you're doing. I think it's all about embodiment, embodied experience. And there, I totally agree with you. There's a problem because the embodied experience of the modern, the human in late modernity is a really weird one. And that is exactly our problem. But it's just as real as this sort of authentic. I see a danger of romanticizing that's often happening, this sort of authentic, l'homme sauvage and all that. So I think we cannot do anything else but take direct experience as our foundation for epistemology, because that's all we have, honestly. But I share your concerns about how do we distinguish the quality of an experience. And maybe if you talk about love, it's something about that quality, that some of these experiences feel better than others. Is that maybe what it is?
Yeah, maybe, but feel better would not be enough. It should feel right. And I clearly see the discussion here, which will probably continue in some ways. And in this respect, I really think. I'm not a relativist, of course, and I clearly think scientific culture does have a problem, and that is actually not taking the risk of following the obvious and shedding this from the beginning and hiding behind certain ideas and not trying it. And I think it's very, very, very important that we do this, that we try this. And I mean, there are many, how can we say, many ways to many things to raise. And one is to say it's somehow essentialist, or the other say it's nativist, or you say it's romantic. But then when you talk to people who do live in topologies, which more or less understand it like this, more or less, then they are very, very sure, and they are sure because they have been told by those beings who are not humans. So they didn't come to this because of human faculties, but they have been told by those who are not humans who share this with us. And I'm just really, really, I've been so gifted by taking the risk, obviously, of welcoming these things, these perspectives, these faculties. Myself, who are not discursive, into my understanding. and I can only propose to try. And of course, I think actually the videos work rather well. It's like Zoom, you still remembered my face from Zoom, so it actually works actually well. But I'm doing a lot of practical work, and it's also interesting because when I do this practical work, I don't have so much discussions in terms of okay, let's conceptually understand this, so let's start to work, and then things happen which we don't discuss because there are so many levels of being which we don't completely grasp but totally share with beings, and these somehow start to come and to surface. And actually, it would be a beautiful idea. I don't want to say challenge because that sounds so like dominant scientific culture again. It would be a beautiful idea to do some of this with a group of people like you, really wanting to understand and to say, okay, now we will just bracket in all this irrational approach. Let's just see what our skin knows. Let's just see how it is to sit for an hour with a butterfly and to breathe together. Let's see what happens. And those cultures who wouldn't get Werner Herzog totally. That's what they do. That's part of the education. That's what they do. They sit with these beings. They listen to these beings. The book what forests think, for example. They listen to their thoughts. The book of the poem, How Forests Think, the anthropologist, 2013. So there are ways in which this has been practiced for thousands of years, which are still there, which are a huge corpus of contemplative science, of non-Western contemplative science. And I really want to open up to this.
But why does it have to be science? It is contemplative. But why does it have to be science?
It doesn't have to be science. I said it so you would buy it more easily.
Yeah, I was just confused. My supervisor Brian Goodwin always talked about the science of qualities. Yeah. I never got why it had to be the science of qualities and not just the experience, the phenomenology of.
Sometimes it's you feel better when you use the word. There's a colleague of mine, a native anthropologist, wonderful guy. And he's teaching at the University of California at Oakland, and he's teaching a course to his students. He's teaching, it's called indigenous science. He calls it indigenous science. He uses it. It's a strategy. There's an indigenous guy. He's an anthropologist, so he's teaching indigenous science. And indigenous science, your assignment is that you every day either that's Husswort or you sit 1 hour somewhere outside with some beings and you just sit. That's indigenous science. It's also a little bit tongue-in-cheek. That science can be like deep inquiry into being, can be different than we know.
Answer, please.
Well, thank you very much for your talk. It was really inspiring. And I have a question about the Francisco Varela because, I may be the only one old enough to also have. And this question is, I am very interested in the topic of relations between living beings, and tomorrow I will talk a little bit about this, but I haven't seen this in autopoiesis or in activism and in organicism. I haven't seen this nearly anywhere. So I have, like you, looked back at what Francisco Varela wrote, and I have found in one paper, I think it's not one, not two, a very short one, the concept of interbeing, which I think resonates to this. But is this all these things about love and is this something that you have found in Varela, or is it just Hans Jonas' idea that you have to be alive to understand life?
Well, it's my personal cocktail.
Yeah.
Yeah. So of course there's a lot of Varela in it, and there's a lot of Jonas in it, and there are also others in it, and there's a lot of happening mellow in it. Of course, so it's my personal cocktail. And you know, I remember that the word interbeing. I talked to Francisco about this before I left to Germany again after my year in Paris, and he used it a while, and he somehow even said to me, don't talk about it publicly because we're just somehow discovering it, and it's kind of like still it's still not still under seal in a way. So he had it somehow present, but that was also shortly before he died. So he didn't write a lot about it. It was related to Lakoff Johnson's latest book, Philosophy in the Flesh. And they talk about it. And then it's, of course, it comes from Thich Nhat Hanh, Buddhist teacher. So then again, there's this relation to spiritual teaching.
Maybe a little shorter, please. Okay.
I work it's a more comment than a question. I work as a scientist on the childbirth, pregnancy, and I'm also a poet. So I just came especially because of the lecture. So I think it's very, very important to maybe remind, not to remember again what is connection like between the fetus and the woman who is pregnant. And I'm talking about the connections is everything. When you are working or when you are connected with the child, connection is everything. So it's for me it's like what you're talking about. Yes, of course. That's the most important thing we have to know, because when we are talking about the childbirth and the pregnancy, medicine has like all answers, but it has not. No. So thank you.
Okay, maybe we can wrap this up here.